So you ready or what?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, this is the first episode of Local Politics. And I don't think that it's just going to be constrained to the mayors and city councilmen. We're going to go all in and get as many opinions as we can. Kevin Haddis is going to be co-hosting with me until he takes the show over. And our first guest, you want to introduce our first guest?
Yeah. So I thought it would be appropriate to start with a friend of mine, a confidant, somebody that will always take my phone call and listen patiently with me, somebody that will call me and ask me sometimes about an idea, and that's Judson Trustee Jose Macias.
Welcome to the show, Jose.
Hey, well, thank you. It's really exciting. It really is.
So, how did you? First of all, you want to give the elevator pitch to everybody who you are, what you do, and who you do it to, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Jose Macias. I'm a trustee for District 4 for Judson ISD. I've been a trustee now for 12 years, and education has just been a personal passion for me. I do what I do because when I was in high school and I was a student, I was not stellar. I was not a good student. In fact, I think I had solid D's on my report card, but it was enough to graduate, right? And back then, my counselor, when they were talking about what am I going to do after I leave high school, said, "Hey, man, I've already enlisted in the military." She said, "Thank God," because she's like, there was no way I'm going to college or doing anything. I was following my father, who was a 22-year member of the military, and so I...
What branch?
The Air Force.
Nice.
The Air Force. And so was able to see a lot, but made that decision, joined, and halfway through, he said, I like this Air Force stuff, but I don't think I want to do it for 20 years. I said, I want to go to college, but I still had that counselor's voice in the back of my head, thank God. I said, was she implying I couldn't make it into college? So subsequently, I got out and ready to tackle the world. I enrolled in college, actually at San Antonio College, and I failed the first 20 semester hours I took. And so as I reflected upon my third semester of complete failure, I said, you know what? Everyone was right. I just need to go back into the military or get a job. And I told myself, you know what? This is BS. I can do it. So here I am, one more semester. I'm already on suspension. I already had to take a semester out because they said, dude, your grade's just all Fs. This isn't going to work.
Yeah. Wasting everybody's time.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's time. And so...
Well, so, I mean, did you have a hard time learning, or were you partying, or didn't focused, or?
It was a combo of both. Obviously, it was a lot of social activities then. Sure. And when I was in the military, I liked to party. And so, again, I had no social conscience of what was happening in my world at the time. And so college was an extension of that. But I had capacity, but I did also realize there were limitations. In college, I was taking developmental courses because I did not have the core education I needed to be college ready. Mm-hmm. So here I am taking, developmental reading, developmental math. And it's, crazy to think about that now. But that experience was what truly gave me the sense of what we need to do in the area of education so that there are no children or students that go through the same dilemma that I did, because not all of them make it. The numbers show that they drop out and they do not come back into college. And so I thought about that road, because that fourth semester I came back, the difference was that I joined a student organization. And when I joined that student organization, I connected with the community. And so that's when the light bulb came on. And I said, this is the type of work I want to do. I want to serve my community. I want to be passionate, but it had to hit at the right time.
Sure.
I went, boom. I started passing classes. I was really connected. I think finding your passion was very critical to knowing that everything you're doing has relevance and you need to stay focused. So I wasn't as social. I was more focused, but I was really an activist on campus. To the time before I left San Antonio College, I was elected student government president. In 2008, Judson was a poor performing district. It was designated in that status, and my daughter was going to elementary school. And I said, I'm ready to do something more. I was in a lot of commissions, a lot of committees. I said, I'm going to run for school board. It's 4 terms later. And on top of that, I did spend 15 months as a trustee with Alamo Colleges.
You're 4 terms in. How long is a term?
4 years.
4 years. 16 years you've been doing this?
Well, 12. And I'll tell you why. Because the first first 2 terms were only 3-year terms.
Okay.
And then, of course, they were expanded to 4. So, yes, correct.
Do you have to go through the typical process that most politicians do as far as in terms of trying to get votes and stuff like this?
I had to
campaign.
I had to shake a lot of hands, kiss a lot of babies. I mean, yeah, the whole gamut.
Because it's a voted position.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
you're going to have to get some trust.
But that's not really where it's at. Let's be honest. I mean, you gotta come home and ask your wife, hey, I'm thinking about running for the school board, and as I've done several times, and the answer is no, and then adjectives are added before no, and so on and so forth. That to me, I think, is probably the biggest hurdle, and I'm sure that is a big hurdle for you too, right? Continuing to serve. I mean,
well, but my wife is instrumental. I mean, she does everything. I don't even pay the bills. I say, here's the check, honey, and I do all the other things, but she pays the bill. She manages the house. She's not as an activist, but she'll vote, and she has a conscience. But it's through her support that a lot of this is possible for me, because there is a lot of time. I mean, it's one of these things. I get asked a question: how much time does it take? I'm like, well, it's like anything in life. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get out. Sure. I put in a lot because I want a lot out of it.
The meetings now that you guys, I walk a lot in the morning, and that's why I listen to the meetings on YouTube, and they're long. Some of these meetings start at like 6, and I mean, what's the latest meeting you ever had?
1:30
in the morning.
In the morning. I mean, and we've had some recently that have lasted to 12:45.
Is anything getting done in those meetings? And I'm not saying that sounds horrible. That sounds really aggressive. I didn't mean it that way. But I mean, is it like y'all are just cooking through some stuff, or y'all are just at an impasse?
Well,
what's happening?
Well, let me give you the situation. Sure. First, this is unpaid. So we're volunteering our entire time. Many of us, not all of us, but many of us have jobs. Yep. So we work our job. Yeah. We go at 6. We're fed reasonably okay, but we wouldn't want to be there unless there was something that needed to be done. And so, and sometimes there's just too much to be done. We've already talked about having 2 meetings a year. 2 meetings a month. I'm sorry, 2 meetings a month, so that we can divide that time. Because I'll be honest, when it gets to about 10, 11, 12, I start feeling like, man, I've been here a long time. Yeah. There was a presentation, I remember I had 100 questions, but I only asked about 2 because it was so late. And I was really just starting to save my energy for the other things that we were going to cover. Wow. So in that situation, it can get long. But to answer your direct question, yes, there are definitely things getting done.
Progress being made.
And being evaluated. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things trustees should always do is provide that oversight. We are that position to provide oversight, and if we're not asking those assessment questions, then we're not truly providing the biggest amount of oversight that we can.
How many of y'all are there?
There are 7 trustees, five trustees that represent a geographical area, districts, and then 2 trustees are at large. And my district is District 4, which is around Judson High School, Converse Elementary, Copperfield. And the last time we checked for registered voters, it's about 50,000 registered voters in that community.
Good Lord.
Wow, but how many vote?
Not many. We had a little over 1,000 that voted in the last election. About
out of 50,000?
About 1,200 voted.
Give me a snapshot of the things that you guys are entrusted with. As far as responsibilities, budget, just give me a quick snapshot of what it is that you guys, because I'm thinking for 1,200 people to vote out of 50,000, well, that tells me, you guys really don't do nothing. Yeah. And I know that's not the case.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. I mean, the vanguard of what we are really tied to is the vision of the district. Where do we want Judson ISD to be 5 years, 10 years from now? But the other very critical piece is funding. How do we allocate funding? How do we use our funding?
If you guys are allocating money to different schools, it seems like there should be more than 1,200 people getting involved in this.
Well, it's different schools, it's different projects, it's different programs, it's personnel. What is really concerning for me is 83% of our budget is tied up in personnel. ISDs, in my opinion, have really got complacent. We were the only game in town until charter schools came. And so now there's competition, which I think competition makes us stronger. And so I certainly
competition makes everything stronger.
Well, I have a follow up to that. How many students are at Judson? Around 21,000.
About 23,000 right now.
And what's the budget you guys are working on right now? What does it look like roughly?
It's over $200 million, almost 300 million actually, when you add the other federal funding and so forth that we're using.
Typically, you have a representative for your district, regardless of whatever that is, if it's school board or if it's your councilman or whatever. I think in a grand scale, some of the problems that we've seen as a country is the free stuff that is promised to people. So in that line of thinking, would the representative of your school district, would you be trying to fight for your school's more money allocation than, say, District 1 or 2 or whatever?
I'll just put it out there. As a District 4 representative, my accountability is to District 4.
Okay.
Will I have a bias to my community? Well, naturally I should. I represent District 4. So I want to make sure that my Converse Elementary, Spring Meadows, Elof, that they have resources. Now, naturally, in the grand scheme of things, I support the entire district.
Yeah.
I love Judson ISD completely, and I'm not going to make sure that we don't have equity in our district. We want to make sure every campus is met with the same resources. But in terms of making sure that happens, the way it works is the community talks to the representative. I'll give you perspective. When I was elected in 2010, Judson ISD collectively was about 55% economically disadvantaged. Now we're at 70%. 10 years from now, we'll be at 80%. And a district like SAISD, 90+% economically disadvantaged, means you have more folks that are working harder or not working or whatever the factors are. So it's basically the beginning of poverty. And so I've always believed education can break any cycle of poverty if we have an educated community.
Back in the 2010 timeframe, back in those days, it seemed like there was more of that between the trustees where there was more butting head. Do you think that's evolved into a better situation for the district?
Yeah, I think so. I was on the board in 2010, and I can tell you the crux of a lot of the issues were related to that same philosophy of, is there representation, or are we all just one? And of course, we talk about we're a team of 7 or a team of 8, but in reality, we're a team, but we need to work together to represent the common good of our communities.
Right.
And so if you lose sight of that, what happens invariably is it seems like no one's thinking. There's no conversations at the board level. There's no conversations in the community about what's happening. It's just a recommendation from administration, and we're done. And then again, why have a board if we're not going to offer questions or rationale or seek resolution on things?
Help fill the listeners in. As you were elected, and then you took a position with a trustee with, is that what it's called, with Northeast Lakeview, or the Alamo Colleges district?
Yes, it's a trustee.
And then you came back to Judson, and they were debating something. I don't remember what it was, but Mr. Macias is very passionate. Let's just say that. And they were debating something, and he said, "Look, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do what's best for this district, and I hope we can get along at the end of it." And I think that is exactly how you said it, right?
Yeah, that's.
Well, and it sounds like that's a pretty good summary of how you've approached it too.
I have a question on how much time does it take you to research your packets? So in Selma, I get my packet and, I read it over the weekend. I go back through it, and if I have a question, I'll email Johnny or whatever and ask him a question. Then we move on. Those Judson packets are massive.
They are. And funny that you say about you email. When I get my packet, I may alert my superintendent that I have a question or two, but I really try to conduct business in public. I want those questions answered, because sometimes what has happened, you get those questions answered, but they're not discussed in public. No one knows. So one of the things that my community always appreciates is that even if I know an answer, I'm still going to ask a question because I want it on record.
Public record, yeah.
And so I want the community to see what our thought process is and so forth.
You guys had a meeting on Saturday where you provided feedback to the superintendent, right? And then she turned around and got that meeting. That presentation by her, by the way, in my opinion, was very well done. She had it, just laid it right out and said, "There you go." And I could feel your frustration a little bit because you didn't have the information. It's a fascinating presentation. Dr. Ball was really on her A game for that one, I felt like. My question is the money. So in the past, it was we're going to have to go into this, into debt, or not into debt, but we're going to have to go into our general fund, or our 8 months of savings, or whatever the district has. How all of a sudden is there money?
Well, it's a top secret, but we do have a money tree. Okay.
We've been shaking the hell out of it.
Why don't you just do this every year? I was like, I mean.
Well, let me tell you, Kevin, let me tell you. What's interesting about where we are now is that we do have what we call a fund balance, which is a reserve fund. And not by law, but there's a provision in the state code that stipulates we need to have 3 months worth of savings in our reserve funds to pay in case the state can't pay or whatnot, so that we can still have payroll met and all those expenditures. So for Judson, for a long time, 3 months worth was about 36 million, 40 million in reserves. So we just have that sitting, and of course we use the interest on that, but it's not like hundreds of millions of dollars,
sure.
but it's still some money.
Yeah,
But let me just tell you something extremely fascinating. When I was on the board from 2010 to 2019, and I stepped off to go to Alamo Colleges for 15 months, our reserve fund was sitting roughly at about 59 million, something around there. I leave, come back in 2021. Now we're looking at 2022, but our reserve fund is at 106 million. And so it essentially grew. And I think in partly because of the pandemic, we weren't using all of our resources. But whatever happened is we had a lot more money in our fund balance. So, Kevin, we actually decided, you know what, it's time to use some of this reserve funds, because we still only need roughly 36 to 40 million to cover payroll, which now means we have extra. So for the short run, to ensure that we are retaining our talent and looking at our processes, we decided it's time to use that to, give substantially raises for our teachers and our employees. And this year, my recommendation was that I asked the superintendent, create a plan that actually pays more to the employees that make less. Our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, our custodial staff, because they're always holding the line. They do a lot of work, but they're paid the lowest.
Sure.
And so we structured our compensation plan this year to pay more to those lower positions, because we hadn't been giving them the love, and we've been seeing a higher turnover in those positions. Now we're pulling bus drivers, transportation from other districts, we're pulling custodians. They're seeing that, we're truly valuing their work. But guess what? That makes life easier for our teachers that don't have to do double duty.
Yeah.
They have to be
teach and drive.
Yeah, the whole thing. So we're actually able to retain the talent. And so it's tiered. Our teachers received a greater pay raise. Our admin received only a 4% instead of 6%. So we had a tiered approach. And I'm liking that, because I'll tell you, TASB's recommendation, when they come down to look at your budget and they give a recommendation, everyone gets 2%. That's it. And I keep asking, if we give everyone 2%, we've done nothing strategic.
Right.
We've just inflated our payroll budget by 2%, and that does nothing for anything.
So you said something that stood out to me a minute ago, and that was when you said that y'all use the interest on that money. It's not lots of money, but the question in my head immediately was, does the school board or the whole district, do y'all have any sort of investment vehicle with that money? Or is it just sitting in a savings account waiting to be used?
It's essentially sitting there. It's a really structured type of utility. We don't go buy things, although we are permitted to buy property.
Sure.
So we do have some property that we're going to use for future bond projects. But no, we don't have investment vehicles for those dollars.
Is it against the law to do that?
As far as I know, because in all my time, that question's never come up.
Well, even like a money market, something that's not going to be, you know what I mean? When you say investing, that definitely opens the door to some shiesty, activity. Yeah. But I mean, if you do something that's just like a high earning savings account or checking, something like that. Like, if you have, $10 million, you're not going to use that all within 12 months. You know what I'm saying? So if you had a short, just something, I don't know. I was just curious.
I'll look into that, and maybe that's something I can follow back on. I would say no.
Yeah.
We're not as very structured and really strict on what we can do with.
You don't think you can get the board to agree to buy some shares of local politics? Or?
I highly doubt
yeah.
that.
I think in the city of my best recollection with Selma is because we're in a strong financial position here in Selma. Some low risk type, treasury securities or something, that kind of stuff. I think you're going to probably be okay. But that is a lot of money, $100 million in savings. And I thought the board agreed around 2010, 2012, in that era, you guys agreed to what, 17% of the budget, or didn't you come up with some arbitrary number of how much you were going to have in savings beyond what the state mandated? And
the only thing that we allocated was that we would put aside $3 million for the acquisition of property or any of those things that come up that might be advantageous. But aside from that, it's always been a 3-month, 30%. 36% in terms of but I never did finish the question about where we received all the money. The money was not purely from our reserves. There were also federal dollars that were been provided to us to help get our students back to grade level. And Judson ISD's portion of that was $67 million through 3 years. And so some of that funding is supporting positions as well as our incentive. We're giving all of our teachers a retention incentive of $1,000 in December. It's coming from that. Nice. And then for our employees that are on the lower end of the pay scale, they're getting 2 $1,000 retention incentives. So custodial staff, cafeteria, the whole thing. And that's going to pay out in December and in May, which again, the whole design is we're using it to retain the talent in the district. So that's where we're getting some of our additional funds. If we didn't have those federal dollars, we would have to either not do it at all or pull from our fund balance still yet again. And right now we're pulling roughly about $20 million of our reserve funds for this year. But one thing that I realized in our budget discussions is that we don't fill 100% of our positions. Usually we're about 89% of our positions are filled, which means we carry unspent and
if you got 85% of your money's allocated to payroll and only 80% of that is being used, you're going to carry a little over.
And so what's happened, and I've asked this question in our budget discussions, how much do we typically get? I'd like to get sort of a trend analysis on that. And typically it's anywhere from 7 to 11 million will come back to. So if you look at that 20 million, and if we're running usually at that, even if we've now increased it and we bring more people, and say we're at 90%, we're still going to have a percentage that is unused that will go back to the budget or to the bank, if you will. And so that 20 million may be closer to 14 million or 13 million that we're using. So I see that as a positive. I'd like to be at 100% capacity, but the reality is we never are. And until we identify why, we're going to always be in that position.
Well, and I think the other thing too that's important, to just kind of wrap up this portion of our discussion, certainly is that meeting that you had on Monday, where you kind of got your packet at the meeting. It was part of the reason was from Dr. Ball's perspective, she wanted to get the word out that these increases are coming, because that's one thing where Judson's really, in my opinion, has improved greatly. Is if they're going to do pay raises, they're going to get that news out in March. They're going to work on that in April. They're going to start talking, get the buzz going around. Yeah. There's some school districts in our area, they don't really know. And I'm not putting any of the other school districts down, but it's not locked in for sure yet. And some of the employees are still kind of waiting and guessing. You sign your contract. It's interesting as a teacher, you sign your, counselor or whatever, you sign your contract. You're locked into that contract, but you can still get out by, I don't know, there's some arbitrary July 1st. July 15th. But you sign it before you know what you're getting paid.
One of the things I'll tell you is that what I've been frustrated as a board member is every year we pass our budget, but there are some districts that are very competitive with us, like Northside, that pass their budgets in August. So they're in a position where they can look at everyone who passes their budget in June, like we do, and say, okay, this is what everyone's doing. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
So they're always that one step higher. Now, naturally, they're also going to need to get the word out. So I suspect this month or in July, they'll be floating what their raises are going to be. my nightmare was that Northside tells their employees, we're going to give you a 10% raise. And so all of a sudden you have employees that may be thinking to come to Judson for a 6% raise, but everyone's going 10% higher over there. You'd probably think, well, people are going to go look at Northside. So what I've asked the administration and my colleagues is that in August, we come back and reevaluate the compensation plan to see if there's anything we need to do to adjust our strategy to retain and recruit. Because I want to make sure that the community realizes we may have completed it formally, but we can always adjust it. And we're not going to decrease compensation. If we bring it back in August, it's going to be increased, and that'll be put out there. We're considering increasing it another % or 2, just to sort of match anyone else that's being competitive. We've never done that in the past, but again, experienced on this board, I know we need to be positioned. And if we're going to keep talent and retain it, this is a move we need to consider doing.
It's interesting. So where does the decision come from to make that announcement in August versus earlier in the year?
You're talking in relation to Judson? The decision will be a board decision. So I myself may
So you guys can
advocate.
You can make that decision whenever you want. I mean,
Yeah.
you'll vote on it, of course, but
we would have to
it's
have.
not a mandated thing or anything.
Nah. We could do it and put it back in. We've done it before. Where in September we're adding incentives to everyone's package just because we can.
Yeah.
So it's not dead, and that's what I want folks to remember. We may pass it by law by June 30th, but we can always revisit it. And if we do revisit it, it'd actually be beneficial for employees because we're going to increase something or give more. Kevin mentioned it a bit ago. We've been a district that brings in new teachers. They get the experience, 2-3 years, and they're out.
Right.
And that has been a chronic problem with Judson.
Where do they go?
They go to districts to pay more money.
Is it? I mean, it's
That's
just it's
absolutely
money.
it.
It's just down.
Or they get out of the profession. Those are the two things that happen.
I'm just a nerd, and I would really like to know what that percentage is of all the people that are leaving your district. What percentage is leaving for more money versus getting out of the trade?
That's a good question. That's something I would like. But I can tell you, we do receive those reports. So but a lot of times we just have to wonder. They're just saying more compensation just to keep the door open, and nobody wants to say we had a horrible experience. We're leaving because I want to. But
sure,
there are some that will indicate what that looks like. A lot of people just say retirement or taking a leave of absence, family. I mean, they put things like that are motivating those decisions.
I remember a lot of people in my neighborhood and friends of my kids, we get together in the neighborhood and have a couple beers in the garage type of friends, and they were going over to the Shirt School District, and I didn't understand why. And that's when I started paying attention to what was going on. And that's when I started asking questions and started, as that kind of continued, I formed a relationship with Jose, and I asked questions. We talk about the budget. These are the good times, because there was discussions like, why aren't we contracting part of our police force? Why aren't we closing some schools? Why aren't we, speaking of Judson is this true? Judson is actually growing?
It is. Yes, it is. And I can tell you why it's growing as well. It's growing because we've opened the doors for pre-K 3 and pre-K 4. Our enrollment in those areas has actually lifted the district to continue a high enrollment, which again is a strategic, awesome thing to do. Now we just need to make sure that we're delivering the type of services our community deserves in pre-K.
Well, can I ask you about pre-K then? So, and I honestly don't know this answer. So do you have to live in the Judson School District to send your kid to pre-K?
No, we actually opened our doors a few years ago. You can live anywhere in the community in San Antonio, in Bexar County, and attend a Judson school.
Is there any data yet? I guess we started the pre-K 4 program. Is that 4 years old?
It's 3 years old. Yes.
Yeah. And so we've been doing that for 3 years at Judson. So I guess we don't have real great data yet, but it should be pretty soon. We should be able to tell how many of those students we're retaining.
Well, absolutely. I think we are retaining them well. What I'm most concerned about is the program helping with student development. Will we see an improvement in student scores because they started? Because the argument is, let's invest money in pre-K because our students will be better prepared when they get to kinder, first, second, and they'll perform better. But guess what? The data won't lie. You'll see the numbers. Third grade is a very, very critical grade. STAR testing, evaluations. So I'm expecting and I'm challenging administration to produce strong results in a 5-year time, because our students would have started in pre-K 4 first. So by year 5, they should be really in a better position. So I look at the numbers, where our students are in terms of, are they at grade level? Are they approaching grade level? Are they really behind? And those are 3 categories the state assesses.
People are leaving education. In the past, we knew when TASB came in and did their little thing, most of those people were going to other districts. We just knew it. I think people are genuinely getting out of education, period. This incentive increase for teachers and this, the pay increase and some of that stuff, that is doing wonders for the world of education, because there's a lot of really talented people that work really, really hard. But the climate in the schools, especially secondary, has changed. Parents have changed. They're more entitled than they've ever been. I'm going to come in, and this is how I want you to teach my kid.
Yeah.
And not only that, and then they get to middle school, and there's problems with discipline like there's never been.
My kid's
it's getting worse in high school. And
look at the kids that just trashed New Braunfels High School. Did you hear anything about that?
Yeah, I saw something on the news.
Not one of them. They rounded them all up. Not one of them got charged with anything.
But the talk back to teachers and the stuff that I hear that is going on is a symbolic of our society a little bit. Where people feel like they can go on an airplane and start a fight with Mike Tyson or whatever. We live in this society now. Well, the students are imitating their parents' behavior. And that is starting to happen in the schools. And in Texas, maybe it's countrywide, I don't know, but in Texas, you're required to educate everybody. You can't just kick kids out of school. It's not like it used to be. I know when I was growing up, if I, skipped an afternoon to go ice fishing, which I never did.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, just in case my kids are listening. But, if I skipped any school or something, I felt like there was going to be serious repercussions, and I was going to be, kicked out of school for a week, and it was going to be serious. It's just not like that anymore. They take attendance at 9:30. The day goes on. The kids get in trouble. And that is putting so much stress on our educators, our counselors, our principals. It's unbelievable how that climate has changed since COVID especially.
Well, and I'll add to this. Whenever my youngest son was graduating high school, he went to Samuel Clemens. And luckily, I didn't have a nickel's worth of problems with my son. Love you, buddy. But the thing did come up where, I was noticing how much blowback on the parents the kids were causing or would cause, right? So like if your kid missed so many days, then they had to go to court, they would fine the parent, or something along those lines. And so as a teacher, as a parent, at the time that I saw that, I was like, okay, let me get this straight. If my kid's an asshole, I'm going to be financially burdened with his assholeness. That doesn't make any sense. That's, what the hell, but and you take a step back. I think I understand the point is that, the school is like, we need your help. So if you don't care that your kids, we're going to make you care. You know what I mean? I think at least now that I'm, a little older, I think that might've been the direction that they're going.
Well, and if you're an educator now, then so you have a student that's a problem, you send them to the office, and you do that too many times, and all of a sudden it shows up in your evaluation. You don't know how to handle this student, and there's pressure. And then at the end of the year, you're graded on a test because we need that data to, and so on and so forth. I don't know if Mr. Macias knows this or not, but Olympia Elementary School was on Fox News and CNN and all those back in the day because the principal, I cannot remember who it was making parents come in and serve detention if their students were tardy. If you had so many tardies, you had to come into Sunday school or something, or Saturday afternoon or something. And I remember it being on the news, and I just remember,
How much oversight into curriculum do y'all have any say-so over that?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are a lot of good remarks that I'll make in terms of what was just stated because there's a lot there. But to precisely answer your question, the board always has input on pretty much anything that we look through, curriculum being a very important piece of it. But the way that the board looks at it, at least I should say because again, I don't talk on behalf of my colleagues. Sure. They all have their own voice. I'm District 4, but the way I look at it is that is the curriculum that we have moving the needle? And since there are so many ways to assess what moving the needle means, are students at grade level? Are they doing well in SATs? Are they doing well in their ASVABs? Are they doing well in just general life? Is that type of performance happening through this curriculum? What makes a Judson sort of special is that we can write our own curriculum to ensure that we're meeting and challenging those tests that come from the state. But everything that we do is based on what the state does. So one of the things that I've always tried to have our administration and my colleagues focus on is supporting SAT development. But the reason why more than anything is because it's a national test. And when you look at states that have higher rankings, Texas is number 45, maybe 43. So there are different assessments that are being evaluated, but SAT is part of that evaluation where our students are scoring. So back in 2010, when I campaigned, I said, our students should take the SAT. Mm-hmm. We should be preparing them as part of that college readiness, our career readiness track. It took me 3 years to get it to a point where we're paying for everyone to take the SAT. So we have SAT days. So where days are set aside in the classroom.
Sure.
It's time to take our SAT. Now, some kids don't care. That's why I learned real quick. Yeah, my first term, I got this pushed through. We've funded it ever since, and it's been great. But not everybody cares to take the SAT.
Yeah. Real quick. So you're saying your school has SAT days, right? Yeah. And this is time set aside so that you can take the SAT for free. Mm-hmm. And a student has the option to take it or not.
Absolutely.
So if they have 3 days of SAT days, they can just play hooky those 3 days?
No, we don't do them in consecutive days. They're usually a certain window of time, 3 times a year or 2 times a year.
Okay.
But it's not consecutive days.
So, but still though, so if they say, hey, this Wednesday is going to be SAT day, and then so a student says, well, I'm not taking SATs, so I can just stay home that day?
I don't know, since I don't work the campus and what they
Sure.
do, but if we have a 96% participation rate, we're dealing with about 4%, and I don't know what they can.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's a good thing. But so,
yeah.
I mean, again, data nerd. I'm not, I'm just curious if it's.
I would imagine, and again, I never asked the question, what do we do with the 4% that don't take it, or why? They either absent, or maybe they're doing some other projects for their other courses, or.
The devil's advocate in me. The reason I was asking a question because it was like, the 96% rate of kids that are taking it's impressive, and so as a student, I'm thinking, does this what does that look like? Is it just a day that hey, you're taking this, you know what I mean? And so that's an awesome percentage of people that are taking it. So then my next follow up to that is going to be, I wonder how many of that 96% actually go on to college.
That is also important to me because SAT is not entirely about going to college. It's always what my belief is, as a board member, we're supposed to prepare our students to be college or career ready. Mm-hmm. I tell you what, if you do well in the SAT and you want to be in a career, you're going to do well in that career.
Sure.
Because you have the confidence to, but you also can decide, well, you know what, I can go to college, which is what happened to me one day. I was at a Walmart parking lot and I saw these kids and they were all gathered. They were acting a little crazy. So I walked up to them and said, guys, what are you doing? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We're just here. So you in school? Yes, we're graduating. I said, oh, fantastic. From where? 1 at Judson, 2 at Wagner. And I said, did you guys take the SAT? Yes, we did. Actually, I did well. I'm getting a scholarship. Things that wouldn't have happened normally because they probably wouldn't have taken it. But because of that, it opened doors and opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's the most we can do.
So it was not required. Obviously, it wasn't required for when I was in school for me to take the SATs, and I didn't. I wasn't coming in on a Saturday and paying anything because I knew I wasn't going to college, and I was like, "There's no point in me taking this test." But I think if it would have been incorporated into the normal class day, I would like to know where I'd have been. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and again, to the whole point of that, I want to know where we are too with our curriculum.
Sure.
You ask, we don't directly motivate or say this. You got to put this in the curriculum.
Sure.
We allow our professionals to do that work, but I certainly want to see the results.
Yeah.
So the results should indicate on the Texas assessments, but they also, in my mind, the STAR, and soon enough the ASVAB. I mean, all of those things are real life deals. And so we should be preparing our students to be ready for that. And so to address the earlier issue about students and their behaviors, it's been a tough year. This year, unlike any other. So we've always had issues with student mental health. And it's something, too, that experience is a beautiful thing when as a board member, you've seen a lot. And, I remember once that really hit me. My daughter, my oldest, is a graduate of Judson, 2013. She's in college, and it's about 2016. And her best friend on the dance team was shot and killed by her boyfriend. Literally here in Judson. And it was traumatic for her. We flew her down. She went to the funeral. But it dawned on me back then, too, that there are children that are suffering from a variety of things. It doesn't have to just be behavioral. There could be some serious other issues on how to deal with relationships. And there's always, so my push back in 2016 was to start working on students' social and emotional well-being. And so we have better plans for social emotional, but as you can tell now, it's even much more of a need to address that mental health. And I'm continuing to advocate for that.
What you just said, the advocacy that you're doing for the mental health, the social, emotional, and mental. What is that? Tell me more about that. Is that so? Y'all are putting together programs for this? What does this look like?
It would be more programs that identify students that are at risk in elementary. Being at risk could be a number of behavioral issues, or it could be lack of support at home. Whatever those risk factors are, there has to be a plan for that student to get them that support, because students typically at risk, they fall behind academically. So at the end of all of this, it's about academic success that's spearheading the need to address social emotional issues.
Well, I think so. I think social services in general has kind of been, I'm from Michigan. I don't know what it was like in Texas, but my parents were social workers, and we had a Department of Social Services. Of course, they called it, the euphemisms came as as we had new governors. I think it ended with the Family Independence Agency or something. Is that CPS here in Texas? I'm not really sure. And I talked to Amy, and she's like, yeah, I just got off the phone with a social worker. And I'm like, oh, wow, they're social workers in Texas. And she says, well, yeah, they work for the school districts.
We do have them, and that's where I'll go back. When I talk about social emotional with my community, and they think first counseling, but there are different ways. I was part of a group that would actually do peer-to-peer, sort of like group therapy with students in middle school, so they could understand their differences. Great program. It was discontinued, unfortunately, and that was oddly a board decision. But because
why was it discontinued?
Because the funding needed to go somewhere to be allocated, and I remember advocating for it, and I lost that argument. It was a 4-3 vote.
To spend money, is that a required 7-0 vote, or is it just a majority vote?
Just a majority.
Is there anything required 7-0 vote?
No,
just majority
vote.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. But the idea and why I brought that up is because if it comes to funding and programs that are innovative, there has to be support for them, and it should be from administration to the board. Sometimes the board has to lay in a little more influence, I believe, because they're whatever reasons. But bottom line is more robust plans for addressing students' social emotional states are needed. And I think it's obvious, unfortunately, that we still see those issues. We shouldn't have kids cutting school. I mean, naturally, I did too when I was a senior, but, I was also ignored. So those things happen.
I think any kind of real pushback I ever had when I was in school started when I was able to drive and when I had a vehicle to drive.
Yeah.
I'd skipped a few times, but it wasn't nothing like, newsworthy or anything like that. But, and I remember my dad saying, I don't think maybe you need to be driving anymore if that's what you think you need to be doing. That damn car is supposed to go from school to the house and back. That's it, So, but, do you have any feedback from your community when it comes to it seems like the topic of year-round schooling has been brought up? It's one of those things because the parents' work schedule doesn't align with the students'
Yeah,
school
no kidding.
schedule.
That's a great question, because it seems like there's times, man, lately. I know the employees get to vote on the calendar and stuff, but it's like 6 weeks in a row my kids have 4-day school weeks, and then I'm coming back from my vacation in Colorado early this year. What's going on, man?
Well, I'm proud to say that Converse Elementary is a full year program. It's one that's being piloted by the district. I'm evaluating it. I'm sure my superintendent and their team are evaluating it.
But it would be kind of nice. I mean, think about it. There's not a lot of people doing it yet. So those students in Converse can go to Disney in October.
I certainly am looking for that, and it's something that I'm proud that we have, and that it's in District 4, and hopefully it yields the results we're looking for.
There was a nationally known football team in our region here called the Judson Rockets. What's going on with the Judson Rockets, man? Everybody wants to know what is going on with the Judson Rockets. I promise I wouldn't put you on the spot, but if I don't ask that question, I'm not doing my job.
Well, and again, I have no official influence on the
They had the pads. They had the equipment. I don't know.
As long as they have all that, I'm happy. I'm a big Rocket fan as well. And Coach Mark Soto, who is our new head coach, who played football for Judson, was on those state championship teams. And I think he brings some experience, and he's here to play.
You want to do a lightning round?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So lightning round. This is just completely off the wall, off the topic. It's got nothing to do with anything. These are random questions. Pick a color. Pick one of these colors here.
Red.
Red.
Rocket red, of
Rocket
course.
red.
Would you rather get a shoulder massage or a foot massage?
My wife has paid for me to get a foot massage at, so I'll go that one. That was actually pretty cool.
Have you had a foot massage? I'm thinking Pulp Fiction.
No, nothing very G-rated, but certainly where she gets her nails done. I forget I don't even know the name of the
Oh,
thing.
like a pedicure. Yeah.
That's what I would never do it. And finally she said, I'll buy it. I'll pay you. Go with me. I went, it wasn't all that bad.
Yeah, they give you a little cocktail or something. Right?
You'd have to get me drunk. Anybody touching my feet, they're going to leave without teeth.
But it was all right. It was all right.
I get so, yeah.
I don't think my wife would say both. Would you rather your voice sound like Elmo or Kermit the Frog?
My daughter likes Elmo. We'll go with Elmo.
I'm going to go Kermit on that one. Would you rather spend a year living at a nudist colony or within the Amish community? That's a terrible question.
Talk about polar opposites.
Do you have more Amish or nudists living in your district?
They're the ones with electricity, right?
Yeah.
So you're either living off candles or...
I'm gonna go Amish on that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Amish nudist colony.
So I had a guest on once, and we were talking about how there's never enough data for us to feel confident in answering questions. This is one of my biggest problems in school. I just felt like multiple choice questions were horrible because there's never enough data. So what comes to mind here is like the nudist colony. What do the residents look like? I'm like, there's not enough data for me to make this.
Swedish nudist. No, I don't see anything.
Are we in Brazil or where are we?
Would you rather see one of your parents having an affair or see your spouse having an affair?
Oh, goodness gracious.
That's a terrible question. Where'd you find this?
I will exert my zero response on that one.
That's fine with that one. We'll
It's all good, man. Somebody might have something to say about that.
I would rather not see one of my parents having an affair with my spouse. This one's actually kind of fun. Would you rather blow your nose with sandpaper or use bubble wrap instead of toilet paper? That one's actually pretty good.
Sandpaper?
I would take the bubble wrap.
Yeah, all day, every day, twice on Sunday. Sandpaper on the nose. Oof.
Yeah.
All right. So
I promised a question where we got to get his answer.
Yeah.
First.
I would reverse the sandpaper and use the other side of it.
It's a problem solver right there.
Yeah, that Judson education. So I do have a question. So the bond, what's going on with the bond?
Well, I can tell you that I've seen a number of bonds in my time, and to put the previous one to bed, so to speak, we didn't lose the bond because it was a horrible package. I mean, all props failed last year when we had it on the ballot. It failed because of the new requirements that Austin put on ballots that stipulate that this is still a property tax increase. And so even though we refinanced bonds where we didn't have to increase the school tax rate in any capacity at all.
Everybody just saw their
Everyone
property tax
saw
going up.
this is a property tax. Again, we as a district have no play on what the appraisal district does to evaluate or increase property taxes.
Well, if I may interject too, for perspective, is this happens with Selma and some of these, a lot of municipalities do this. They have their tax rate. Part of that's maintenance and operations. Part of it's to pay off debt, right? So what happens is there's some debt that's about to expire, about to fall off. It's going to go away. And so if you let that happen, you will cut your tax rate. Okay. Now the values still go up, but you're cutting your tax rate. If the bond doesn't pass, that you're going to lose that tax rate. It's going to come down a little bit. That's why the state felt obligated to put it in there that this will be a tax increase.
A property tax increase.
A property tax increase. What they should say is, if you pass this, you know what would be best? If you pass it, this will be your tax rate, which is what it's been.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't pass it, this will be your tax rate.
But my opinion is that we also have not completed our previous bonds. There are projects that we passed in 2016, 2017 that are still not completed.
2013, when I first, I think it was my first election, wasn't that the Mackey bond when he was, Dr. Mackey, when he was superintendent, wasn't that the one that got veterans built and stuff? That was 13, right?
Yeah, that is, most of that is completed because we look at all the bond projects. But
just recently completed the entryway for Olympia Elementary. Used to be able to walk in the front door, no buzzer, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
No buzzer. And they just finished that last year. And in the meantime, because there was school shootings happening,
right.
I called, this was something that we discussed passionately about. And I talked to my representative, who's Suzanne Canoyer, and she was always understanding and help. She agreed and helped do everything we could. But, I kind of felt like, this was passed in 13. Schools are getting shot, and I heard stories about an audit. I get, where a police department does audits on themselves. And I heard a story about one of our plainclothes officers walking in and walking all the way to the back of the school before anybody said anything.
Well, since those projects weren't completed, that was another contributing factor. But in terms of my own personal advocacy, I'm working to, with administration and my colleagues, to get a major security bond package in wake of Uvalde. I was on the board when Sandy Hook happened in 2012, and the horror of that incident. We upgraded a lot of our facilities. In fact, we mandated that all new facilities going forward had vestibules to control entry and access because our older schools did not. But we've never gone back and fixed the older schools. I mean, there are some security mechanisms, but we need to upgrade all of them. So I'm really hopeful that we can have some discussion and have a ballot item on November for just security enhancements. But that's something I feel is still needed.
Do your teachers have the are they allowed to carry?
No,
because it's a gun-free zone.
It is, yes.
Is that a state mandated thing?
Districts do have the ability to change policy, localize it. I don't think Judson ISD is ready for that yet.
Sure. So, and I wish I would have asked before. Here we are now. I'm not 100%, but I feel like our teachers in Livonia, they have that option.
They do.
So
they recently passed it.
So they have the option to carry.
They do.
This is such a horrible subject to talk about but I think it's a responsible one that we should talk about. I don't feel like it is the right direction to mandate a teacher to carry a firearm, but I also feel like it should not be inhibited for them if they want to. If they, possess the responsibility to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think in the possession of the responsibility, and I'm an avid gun owner, there are good guys with guns, and bad things happen. Yep. Sometimes they miss.
Well, there's a responsibility conversation to have, I think, for sure.
Yeah, right. And I think we have people that are wearing armor that won't go in. that stand outside in the hallway or outside of a school or whatever, that they're afraid to go in when there's a gunman in there.
Oh, you're
I just
talking
don't
about
know.
recently?
Yeah, I don't know with a teacher. I just don't know that many that I would feel comfortable having a firearm around my kids.
I hear what you're saying.
It's a good conversation.
I think so, right? And there, unfortunately, there's no black and white, right or wrong. I'm not a big fan of mandating anything,
Right. Yeah.
But if my sister-in-law, for example, was in a classroom when that happened, I know her, and I would feel complete confidence in her ability. How much more responsibility do you want to put on your teachers? You're going to teach a class full of kids and then also carry a weapon. You know what I mean?
Here's your 6% pay increase from $1,000. You're an armed marshal now. With no armor.
You see all the comments across the internet, and they're always right. The internet's always right. I don't know if you know that or not, but the internet's always right. They were saying there needs to be locks on every door. You know what I mean? And so somebody piped off with welcome to maximum security. Get your kids trained early on life to be in a maximum security prison. And it's like, do you lock your door when you go to bed at night? I mean, would you? I mean, come on, that's such a ridiculous. They're not talking about kids walking in shackles.
But I'll
you know what I mean?
I will tell you, even at going back to Judson, I've been on some campuses. My kids are in 2 different schools. My wife works at another one, and I get invited to do stuff at other schools. And I'd go around and check doors, or just not hit the door jamb, hit the regular part. They're not locked.
Oh,
they're not locked, and I'm not throwing any principals under the bus or anything. I'm not.
Well,
saying
but not only are they not locked, I mean, and I don't know this, but I know that there is some sort of building code that requires a certain amount of passive doors in case of fire or something like that. You can't be locked or trapped in an area.
Well, they got the safety bumper doors.
So on one side, obviously not the other. You know what I'm saying? The other side, because otherwise, why would
you can't get in, right? Yeah.
So, but to that point, the safety bumpers are pushed in and they lock them open. You know what I mean? And so, it seems like you see a variety of that.
But it does make me wonder, is that, and I know you can't disclose all the safety stuff, and I saw you guys went in for some sort of security audit into executive session. Are you guys regularly updated on that, or just since the shooting you've been updated?
Talk about throwing a lot at you, huh?
Yeah. Well, I know.
He's over there just waiting patiently, like, if you shut the hell up, I got to answer all these questions.
I know. Well, I know, but because it's something that it's in the news, and and obviously, we have a trustee here that's going to push a bond that's going to keep my kids safer. Yeah. So I'm definitely want to hear about that. But at the same time, it's like, what have we been doing? How often do they do an audit?
And again, 1,200 people out of 50,000 voted.
Really, our elementary schools are probably they don't have police officers there right now because they're at middle schools, they're at high schools. So the intent is to restructure that because that's a very vulnerable area. Yeah, the administration went in and made sure everything that needed to be locked was done at the end of the year. We'll continue to work through that, but they're temporary. We need much stronger features.
Well, I remember being in high school, we walked between, 5 different buildings in and out. I mean, you want to lock all those doors, and then in between classes, you want to make sure that they're unlocked so that kids can get from one building to the other. You know what I mean? And
that's something too that when we look at this intelligently, and we come to the community for a facilities package that's secure, do we now build connectors?
Right.
So there is no exposure. And those are things that we'll have to have evaluated to see what we're going to do specifically.
I don't know how to say this without it coming across insulting. I'm not being insulting, but it seems like the react phase of this should be long gone. We should, we had an issue. We should have building code in place to where this really doesn't even fall in y'all's hands. You know what I'm saying? This should be a design issue on how the buildings are built and proceed to keep being built. You're going to have an addition onto the property. This is how the life safety plan needs to work, whatever. Because I guess really the school shooting aspect of it hasn't changed. You still have somebody who's mentally ill, who is, doing some horrible, tragic thing. You know what I'm saying? It just sucks that we can't keep our attention span on it long enough to inflict.
Well, we do, and we have trainings, right?
Yep.
The kids, it's like fallout shelters in the classrooms and stuff. Remember we used to probably remember some of that stuff when you were.
Yeah.
You know, the
And
kids go through all
I,
that.
I did ask my middle schoolers, and I don't know if we're as diligent of it anymore because they have not done that. I mean, they're paying attention
Sure.
now, but no, in terms of the proactive position we've taken is that we do have structures that we build going forward that will meet the criteria.
Mhm.
It's our older facilities that were designed that before all of this really was conscious in our mind.
So the newer facilities, does that responsibility fall on the school board and then
In part, the administration and school board, because we have to ultimately hire the architecture
Sure.
who puts the facility together, and that's funded by bonds as well as the board.
Is there, like you can get LEED certification, which is, for greener building products and stuff like that. That's a whole certification in its own. There's lots of different certifications that you can get as an architect or an engineer or whatever. Is that a certifiable thing? Do you know of?
I'm not sure. I mean, again, that's more in the admin execution. We put the vision, we give the funding. We're hopeful that the quality is now where it needs to be from that end of it. But I can assure you that back in 2012, every bond project regarding a new campus, they were going to be built to a higher degree.
Sure.
It's, again, just the older facilities. And we have
Well, and for the design part
32
too.
campuses.
Well, is there 32?
There are 32 different facilities.
Yeah, but some of them are the same.
Yes.
Right, and that's one of the things that Judson did that I thought was a change since you got on the school board. Was they repurpose the design
Okay.
because it works, right? So why do it twice?
But still, it's still not foolproof. And unfortunately, if you look at the very first mass shooting at Columbine,
Mm-hmm.
the students knew how to get in. They nobody was looking. So any student anybody that's within the campus would probably still have the ability to bring a gun in or any of those. We've had actually students, you'll hear in the news, they were arrested because they brought a gun, loaded or unloaded, to the
Sure.
campus, which is not permitted. And let me just allude on a couple of things, too, that I think will help. I'm all about continuing to increase the quality of work that the board does.
Sure.
And so 2 months ago, we passed the creation of an internal audit mechanism. And for folks that are listening, an internal audit mechanism is an independent third-party audit process that reports straight to the board.
Mhm.
It doesn't report to administration, it goes straight to us. So if we tell our internal auditor the board would like to see a security audit, they'll do an independent security audit working with administration, but not reporting to them. And that's a really big thing because
Wow.
a lot of
That's-
times
yeah.
administration may exercise an external audit or whatever, but guess what? That audit feeds through administration ultimately to the board.
Right.
So
there's
who's writing the check to him?
Yeah.
And you said it right.
Yeah,
Whoever
yeah.
writes the check is good. But the internal auditor, I won't say they don't care what administration says, but their responsibility isn't to report their facts
Right.
to them. They report to the board. Then the board can make that assessment.
Yeah, is it going to be like a link, kind of like you can report fraud and stuff on the?
And that's another one. Thanks for mentioning that, Kevin. Back in 2011, I helped institute a fraud and abuse hotline for the district, so people could call in. But that fraud and abuse hotline goes straight to administration.
Yeah.
Now, they have to give the board the report. But can you imagine if there's an administrator that there's somebody you suspect fraud, you're not
Yeah.
going to call the number. So the internal auditor will be the feeder in terms of getting that information and then reporting
Nice.
to the board.
Eliminating that chain of command, so to speak. There's going to be, I think, more availability of information than there normally would be.
I can tell you that's something I'm very excited. I've been actually advocating for an internal audit process since my first year on the board, but it's been highly political. And I will give Dr. Ball all the credit. She's the superintendent that is willing and is prepared to help us do that for the district.
So what do you think has been the most controversial thing you've ever done while you've been on the board? I can tell you a couple of stories. Macias, there was a chairperson, and he's still in the community. I'm not going to run anybody over at this point because they don't have an argument anymore. But there used to be some all-out, world-class scraps on that board there for a long time, and there's been some divided boards. Overall, I think this board gets along almost better than a lot of them that you've been on. But what do you think's been the most controversial thing that Judson's done? I know what it is in my mind. I'm just curious.
Oh, you know what?
Well, yeah, my kid's going to attend that high school, but
The naming of the Veterans Memorial High School.
oh boy,
which of all issues, of all things that has nothing to do about anything, it's just a name on a building.
Sure.
But I got more calls for that issue than ever. I always like to joke that my wife was mad at me because I remember I went to the meeting and she told me, "Don't vote to support that name of the school." I'm like, it's a name of a school, for crying out loud. It has nothing to do with student success.
And may I interject for the record? So Dr. Mackey was the superintendent for a long time at Judson.
7 years.
Yeah, he lasted quite a while at Judson, and he never did me wrong or my wife wrong or anything like that. But he was definitely controversial. He's kind of more of a heavy iron fist. You're
My
not
way or
doing
the
your
highway.
job. But yeah, he'd move. Send to be principals at all these different. It was a different management style,
Sure.
and because of that, he wasn't very popular with most of the people that worked at Judson, the most vocal people for sure. So they built this new high school that got passed. That was the 13 bond, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is going to serve the Judson's geographical area is pretty phenomenal. It goes all the way from TPC down to Kirby.
Jesus.
Yeah, and so it's got some challenges there, especially with the police force and getting to these schools. But anyway, so they built this school, and there was coming time to name it, and under threat from his wife. How did you vote that night? I'm kind of.
What do you mean?
I remember. I want you to say it.
How do I vote?
I got to poke you in the eye a little bit. I mean, what happened?
But it is a funny story about governance, believe it or not. So, because I went into the board meeting thinking it's just a freaking name. It's just a name. It has nothing to do with, and I already knew the votes were to support the naming of the school, Willis Mackey High School. I'm like, oh, sorry. My wife told me not to vote for it, but I vote on everything, and this one doesn't matter. It's the only time in my entire board life that I voted yes, even though I didn't agree with it, because it was just a name. Said it doesn't matter. I'm going to vote yes for it. So when it first came in, I voted yes. I slept on the couch that night because that was not.
Oh no!
But my wife was mad. You did not. She was mad. But because I voted yes, our board operating policies enabled me to put the item back on the agenda. Had I voted no for it, it would have been a 4-3 vote. But I voted yes. It was 5-2. But because I voted yes for it, I could put it back on the agenda.
And slept on the couch.
Yeah.
To vote on it again. And because I was getting calls and emails and text messages, I hadn't talked to some of these people in 4 years. I'm there randomly. Macias, what are you doing? So I said, well, let's reconsider this. We had no idea it was going to be this controversial.
Oh, so we got our first dirt. We got our first controversial.
Well, you have to understand.
We got a bot politician here.
Yeah, I know. No, well, you have to understand a little bit that, I was dating Amy. I remember being at her apartment down in Almost Park, and the meeting was on, and something popped up on Facebook and said, I wasn't watching the meeting or whatever. Something popped up, and Amy's like, "Oh my God, Macias just voted for Mackey High School. Oh my God!" and so I texted him, and then right as Amy said that, Jeff Flynn sent me a text or something. Can this be true? And I'm like, he's a man of the people. I'm kind of surprised myself, and I texted him, and he said, and I did all these funny emojis, the wide eyes, like, what were you thinking, and he goes, yeah, I know. And like I said, for the record, Dr. Mackey's never done me wrong or anything like that, but I just knew, I knew that this was going to be controversial. And he's an alpha male type of guy, and, and they really went after him hard. And I just remember I remember you texted me and saying, yeah, I'm sleeping on the couch. And then a couple days later, you figured out that you could go you could ask that be put back on because you voted.
Yes.
Because and sometimes I think it's just God's will. Had I not, the board president at the time could have just denied it, because policy shows if you voted no, you can't bring it up unless someone from the yes party wants.
And I remember at that school board meeting too, for the record, just since we're going to have the little history archive here of this story, is I remember like two people came and spoke for it, and it was Mayor Suarez and Converse and somebody else. I don't remember, and I don't think anybody spoke against it. Maybe people were there just to staring you down or something. But I don't.
Well, what ended up happening is that the board president, it was Steve Sellier at the time.
Yeah,
he still told me no. He told me, no, I'm not going to put it back on the agenda. I said, hey, I was on the yes part of this. I can do it. So he ignores my text and my email, and then he sends me an email. I'm sorry, we spent too much money on it now, so we can't put it back on the agenda. Which there is another rule: if you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars,
sure, it's a done deal.
You can't change it. And so did the right thing. Well, how much did we spend on this? We just literally just named it last month. How much did we ended up spending? About $12,000 in part of the process for the school name at the time. And I said, that does not rise to hundreds of thousands. The community is speaking right now, and clearly there's a concern there.
You got on Facebook.
And then he was in Hawaii. He said, Mr. Macias, I'm not going to put it back on the agenda. So the Express News got involved, and the Express News put it in their editorial. Board president is denying the right of a board member to put an item on the agenda. And within 2 weeks, it was on the agenda.
So let me ask you. So what's next? All right. So is there any Judson election this November? Maybe your security bond, the bond, the safety.
It would be. We'd have to decide that, I think, in July. I think, if we're going to do it for November. If not, it's going to move to May. And of course, it's not just my decision. Administration has to come prepared with what we would do, because we have to put this forward to the community.
Right.
We can't act like we need $100 million for what.
Yeah.
We need to be very clear on what those upgrades might look like for the community.
And then, are you up for election in May?
No.
It's going to be my representative, right? Suzanne Canoyer?
Yes, there'll be trustee for District 1.
Because you guys do those 6 or 8 year terms now, or whatever you guys are doing.
They're 4-year terms.
Yeah, it must be nice. And Selma, every 2 years, I got to go down and fill my paperwork and bite my nails.
And then
when was the last time you had somebody run against you?
Man, I don't know.
So what's this biting your nails crap?
Well, because we did have a Selma resident, Alton Crane, came and filed it against me. Unfortunately, we didn't put his date of birth on it. It's actually a funny story, and I'll tell it since we got a minute. When you turn in your paperwork, that becomes a public record. I filled out all my paperwork. I turned it in. The elections official, city secretary or whoever, crosses out my date of birth. Right, or date of birth and Social Security or whatever. There's 2 things that they're allowed to cross off. We had a resident of Selma who's friends with Alton, went in and filed an open records request, got my application paperwork, so they knew exactly what needed to be filled out. Kind of a smart move. I was like, that's genius. Like, wow, they're smarter than I thought. Johnny calls me, city manager. Well, I got good news, and I got some news. What's not good news? I'm like, well, what is it, dude? Like, this is not the time to mess with me right here, 15 minutes before, because it's kind of a jerk move to file on somebody. It's like poking them in the eye a little bit, right?
Right before the weekend?
Right. Well, it's the filing. That was the filing deadline. You have like 3 weeks to fill out your paperwork. You're going to fill it out 15 minutes on, like, that's a real jerk move, And so anyway, I got a call, and he said, well, we have an email out to the Attorney General because Alton Crane came in and filed against you to run against you, and we had to contact the Attorney General because his date of birth wasn't on his application, so that makes him ineligible.
Was this the last?
Yeah, the last day, and so it was genius that they went and pulled my paperwork, filled out all the paperwork, and turned it in. Right? That was genius. Like, man, that's a great way to fill out a packet. Right? Smart. But they filled it, and then they went to poke me in the eye by turning it in at the last minute, but then they didn't have enough time to go redo and correct the paperwork to get it in on time when we realized there was an error. So,
real quick, I don't know, did we ask what you do for a living? Are you retired?
No, I'm not retired. I do have a day job, and I've been a nonprofit development fundraiser for almost 20 years, and I enjoy that work and that flexibility. I currently work for a private school, St. Paul's Episcopal Monesary School, near Grayson, so not too far from the Pearl. Mm-hmm. And I'm their executive director of development there. Okay. And I love it. I never knew what Montessori education was until I joined the team, and a very fascinating way to educate. It's a pre-K through 6th grade. Okay. And if you're not familiar with Montessori, it truly is about students creating their day. They pick what they want to work on.
So I'd never heard the name before, but I've heard, I know firsthand some parents that homeschool their kids do it this way.
Yeah.
So what is it called again?
Monesary.
Monesary?
Do you have to have a strong family structure to help support you through something like this, or is this something that anybody can do?
Anyone. And I was going to mention SAISD has opened up 2 Montessori schools in their district because of the effort to be innovative. And so I've toured those campuses to just understand when you have a free flow sort of a curriculum day, how does an ISD do the STAR test?
Right.
Because those things are still mandatory.
Relevant,
At a private school, they're not. You can test any other way you want. You don't have to do that. But at an ISD, you do. So I'm looking at that just to see how they're doing. It's brand new. Apparently, they don't have enough data as well. But
Sure.
It's still a good approach.
What do you think the biggest mistake you've made on the board has been? If you had and this isn't just a hit. I've got a couple things here like this. So, your biggest mistake and your biggest win, or the last 12 years, what would you think each of those would be?
That's very hard because you can. I mean, the compensation plan of 6%. More than we've ever done in 20 years is a win for our employees. It's a win for our district. The SAT, the fraud and abuse efforts. I mean, there are multiple wins.
That's hard because it's fluid, right?
It is,
Politics is fluid. Like, the thing about Jose here is he gets beat and he keeps it's not, he gets knocked down. He's never out. He comes back at it from a different angle.
Maybe a loss, I was instrumental in bringing litigation, suing contractors and architects for the facilities. And Kevin mentioned it earlier about Converse literally sinking.
Mm-hmm.
There is litigation to reap some of the funding back for that. Our taxpayers paid for a school like Converse Elementary.
Yeah, it's not going to sink.
Yeah, that's going to stand. And what happened was the other builders, other architects walked away. They're like, oh, we're not going to do any business with Jeff. You guys are going to go sue Happy. We're out. And that delayed projects. It increased pricing.
That's something that I wouldn't have,
So I didn't think about that. So if you talk about distress, now I'm like, oh no, what the heck did I just do? Because again, accountability. Sure. My community deserves that, and we deserve it. But that was the adverse effect. It took a while to win back confidence that we're not sue happy. Just build the darn school in the
way
best
you said it was going to be done.
Yeah, don't, and we're good.
What would you say is the biggest myth about being on the school board or being a trustee?
That we run everything.
Yeah,
we don't. We have one employee. It's our superintendent. She's the one that's accountable to us. We empower our superintendent to manage the daily operations of the district. So sometimes I'll get calls from community members about concerns, and I'll listen because I need to be aware of them. But I can't direct anyone to do anything because it's only through board policy and at the boardroom do I have any authority to do anything.
Do you feel like there's a lack of participation in the community?
There are a lot of individuals who are involved now. Could we open that door to include more? Yes. When I was at Alamo, I created a District 2 advisory committee. I had not created one, but since I was new to that district, I said, I need to plug in with folks. Yep. Let me create an advisory. And I had a very strong and robust advisory from all sectors of District 2, which I represented at the time. So when I came back to Judson for my 4th term, I said, I love this advisory. So I currently have a District 4 advisory committee, 13 community members from across District 4.
Who picks these people?
I asked for volunteers. I put it on our massive social media. I put it on my own personal. I asked friends. I'm trying to grow it.
So okay, so you have 13 now?
13.
Is that did you have like 15 and could only take 13, or is it just something like you've been able to take whoever wants to help?
Whoever wants to help at this point.
Very nice.
And it's 13, but I want to set the standard. This is only going to be our 3rd meeting, so it's still relatively
pretty new. Yeah.
Because the pandemic also slowed that. We really couldn't be meeting, but now let's go forward.
Well, yeah. And I mean, if you got, that's terrific. I mean, you can cover more ground that way. I got a question for both of y'all since y'all are both in elected positions.
Okay, good.
We'll start with you. Do you have an opinion about term limits?
I do. I have one.
Do you think there should be term limits?
I do not think there should be term limits
in any sort of elected position at all.
You know, I'm comfortable with the national term limits at president and governor and so forth. But I can tell you that in school board governance, if we termed out after 2 years, I mean, the average time of a board member is less than 6 years. For me, it took me my first term to really understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And then if I get a second term, I know more what's happening. But you know what? It took a third term for things to finally get moving because there's so much around issues being passed that you need to be able to be continuously on it. The internal auditor one is a big example. I started raising that question and bringing it to the board in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
We got little pieces of it done, but now it took to 2022 to finally get to a point where I really feel it can really take hold.
So, President, you know, some of those type of things, certainly. When I have a staff, our council has a staff member that works for us, right? The school board has a staff member that works for them, right? So any individual school board member can only become so powerful.
Okay.
Right? What scares me where term limits are needed is where like a president that served 40 years or these dictators that Putin or whatever, once they,
Sure.
That's what makes me nervous because they have military and they can influence the police and so on and so forth. I think with city councils,
Local level.
with local level, I don't think we can control that. Now, there's some mayors, I guess, you know, you could make an argument, but, you know, I do think that for city council, you know, the mayors don't have a military. You know what I'm saying? They don't. And
not a military, but I mean, they can have significant financial gain. Could have, you know what I mean?
Well, and the council's there also to hold them accountable.
I don't have, and just so anybody listening to this is that I'm not baiting either one of these guys. I don't think I can, again, with the data thing, I don't think I have enough data to answer that question because I don't think it's a blanket. I don't think it could be a blanket, you know, yes or no. I don't know. I think it kind of comes down to the people too, you know, the person, you know what I mean? You do not strike me as the type of person that is going to be motivated by anything other than the success of the students. You know what I mean? And, you know, you the same way with the success of Selma.
Well,
you know
thank
what I mean? I truly do believe that. I really
that is,
do.
well, it's a true statement.
Well,
at least in my case,
I try not to. But so, yeah, I don't know. It's tough to try to make rules for a broad range of different motivated type of people. You know what I mean? But, you know,
good question.
It's just an interesting take, I think. So I guess you can go pee now.
Thank you.